Welcome back to the Jersey Oddcast with Joseph F. Berenato, Gabriel Donio, and me, Gina Rullo. Hey guys, how was your week?
Not bad. How was yours?
Eventful, but we can go into that another time, I think.
Yeah, mine was eventful as well, but we'll get that down the line.
Yeah. Joe, it's been a week for reorgs across the state. Everyone is now in place. Everyone had to have their organization meetings, municipalities and school boards. And I think you went to the town. Did you also go to the school or just the
I just
town?
went to the town. It was originally scheduled for Monday the 6th, but it was postponed because of Snowmageddon. So it was held.
I'm sorry, we're calling 4 inches of snow,
We're calling
Snowmageddon.
anything over a half inch Snowmageddon. Yes. If I
Okay,
have to
thank
go
you.
out and shovel, it's
That's
Snowmageddon.
that's sad.
Yeah.
Understood.
I mean, come on. I don't want to get into start sounding like my grandpa. Like in my day, blah blah blah. But come on, it was 2 inches of snow. All right. Anyway,
Anywho, so
go
So,
ahead.
yeah, it was held on Tuesday the 7th.
how did it go? What was the attendance like?
It was well attended by the family members of those being sworn in, not so much
Mhm.
by way of the public at large. Probably on par with just your regular run-of-the-mill council meeting, but insofar as family members, everybody who was receiving some manner of oath of office, whether it was council member or solicitor, it seemed like family came out en masse for that.
That's
Yeah.
great. Were there any surprises, any interesting speeches? This is Mayor DiDonato's last year in office, unless he chooses to run again. So, did he say anything? Was there any state of the town address, anything like that?
Well, the mayor usually gives a mayor's address at the end of the reorg meeting, and during that, he went over the last 15 years of his term as
Mm.
mayor. We've done this, we've achieved that, and so forth. And it seemed like a summation. It didn't Nowhere in there was it, and I look forward to doing this. It was mostly, it has been an honor to be your mayor for these 15 years. I'll cherish this time of my life. But it certainly sounded like a closing, for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely. It sounded like a
Yeah.
validation. That way. One point about these reorganization meetings that a lot of people may not know, they come out of the New Year's honors, which is a tradition in Great Britain, where they give out all the knights and knighthoods and things like that on New Year's Day. We used to in Hamilton have our reorg every New Year's Day because Hamilton kind of has its roots in New
Oh,
England
yeah.
and had its roots in that. So a lot of people when people say, "Well, why do we do this?" You have to reset, and we still follow a lot of what Great Britain did, in England.
Yeah.
I was at work this week and someone was going through one of my slides and they're like, "You spelled canceled wrong." And I was like, "No, I didn't. We use one L in America and they use two L's over the Atlantic in Great Britain. So we are a one L nation for canceled." And he's like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "I think so. I was an editor for 25 plus years. I have the experience." He's like, "Okay."
you know, Listen, we dropped the second L, and we also dropped doing the reorg on January
I,
1.
I,
So
And we dropped T in
yeah.
the Boston Harbor. So we think we're
that's
good.
I, I,
right. No, that was a
I
different thing.
will
So
say,
let's
Oh,
move
though,
it on.
sorry.
that, of the traditions that we've kept from Great Britain, I think I'd give a week's pay if our town solicitor had to wear that white wig every meeting.
That'd
I
be
would
great.
enjoy that severely.
Be a
You
great
is,
look for
Michael
him.
Malinsky, you would like to see him wearing
Yes,
that?
absolutely. Little powdered wig with the curls and the whole
Isn't he
nine.
a
Get like
former
a
classmate of yours?
barrister,
Oh,
like
yeah,
the
we were in
whole
Cub Scouts together,
down the
academic
shoulders.
team, the whole nine, but I don't think I could convince him to wear that. No.
Have
Yeah,
you
no.
asked?
No, this just occurred to me. So maybe the next meeting I'll ask him.
And
Well,
listen, there's
Michael
still
Malinsky, if you're watching this, or anyone related to Michael, please encourage him to dress up for Joe at the next council meeting.
maybe wear the wig. I will say this: we do still have a lot of formality at these meetings. I mean, people dress up; they get in suits and right. I
Yeah.
mean, it's Joe. You
Yeah,
went.
and
It's still like
rightly so. Regardless of what you may think about any individual elected, if when a member of the public addresses council, it should be council person this or councilman or councilwoman. Don't call them by their first name. Dress like you're in a place worthy of respect, but I'm a little old school like that.
Yeah, yeah. No
If that is
hats.
just
No
one
hats.
way, you're very old
Yeah.
school. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, no bulk.
I don't enjoy it when men wear hats inside. I think that's just off-putting. I guess women, it doesn't bother me as much as if it's a fancy hat. A ball cap a little bit bothers me inside, but any kind of man wearing a hat inside really bothers me, especially a ball cap. I'm like, guys,
No,
we're in a council chamber. It's a courtroom. Let's show a little respect. Or we're in a restaurant.
yeah.
You
I don't want to
know,
be too tangential, but that could be a pull for another day. But and should be maybe about hats. I would not wear a hat indoors, just in
No.
general. Unless I absolutely
I
had
mean,
to. I just don't see
there
it.
have been
But
times where I have worn a hat, say, if I went in to grab a cup of coffee at a diner, especially early in the morning when you have the farm crew go in, everybody's wearing their hats.
fair.
But or even sometimes for lunch, but if I'm going for dinner, I am not wearing a hat. If I am going in after dinner for coffee afterwards, I am not wearing a hat. It's just not appropriate at all.
So it's a time and place thing. It's an occasion thing. Know your place. Don't wear one out of viewing.
Right.
Don't wear one out to dinner. Maybe if you're getting coffee or you said lunch, that makes sense, especially if you're someone who's working outdoors.
yeah,
Agreed.
I
Well,
once
but that
told the
definitely
whole
could be a
table.
poll.
No, yeah, that should be. I once told a whole table of kids in a restaurant. I didn't even know them to take their hats off. It was bothering me so much. I couldn't let it go. I'm like, I guess I should just walk by, and I probably shouldn't say anything. But I'm like, no, no, get those hats off. We're inside. What are we doing? So you
Were
remember?
you 90 at the time? When did you do
I was
this?
not 90. I was at, I believe, I forget what mall, Garden State
Mm.
Mall,
Oh, so
I
this is
think.
back.
And
This is
then,
back a while.
well, it was probably a good 10, 12 years ago. And I would say, I'm trying to remember, it was illegal seafood. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's
that
if we're talking about the times when
we
we
were
went
at.
to legal seafood, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I think it wasn't the Paramus Mall. It was the Garden State Mall. But enough tangent. Where are we, Gina, in the rundown?
So Town Hall is rightfully in downtown where it belongs, and downtown it seems to be having a lot of activity right now, especially for January. I see that Brian Howell's law office is now part of Lawletta Birnbaum, and it's one of those things that's what's old is new, what's new is old. There's a familiar name on the signage on the window there.
Almost the
Hmm.
same.
Yeah, it's familiar. Michael C. Donio's name is on the window. He is the son of Judge Michael Donio, retired state Superior Court
Superior
Yeah.
Court.
judge.
Hmm.
And it's kind of refreshing to have this next generation of lawyers in downtown. Gabe, do you remember? Obviously, he must be Michael's a cousin. Do you remember when he was downtown in that corner
Yes.
space?
Yes, originally they were in the house, if you're on Central Avenue, next to what used to be Olivo's, which made sense because Frank Olivo was a partner. And the house still stands. It's to the left of what's now Bernie's
Is that White
Antiques.
House?
Okay.
And that was Tony. Well, it's not, I don't know if it's white. It may be gray
Mm.
now, but it might be white. I'm not sure. But it's a two-story house next to the parking lot, right up from
Yeah.
Town Hall.
Yeah.
So it's on Central. That was there, and then they moved. They moved, I think, in 1987. I want to say to the Bellevue and Horton building, which was being restored, and they became a marquee tenant. And it was Donio, Olivo, and Hal right on that corner. And I think Brian has been there since '87. Obviously, the judge went on to become a Superior Court judge, but to have his son back with Brian is a Hamilton story that you have to
Yeah.
love, even if it's Loletta Birnbaum now, and their names are on the door, Hal and Donio. So that's pretty wild, I think, in a generation for that to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then it looks like we're getting an urgent care kind of a place at the corner of 2nd Street and Bellevue in the former Sears building, which it hasn't been a Sears in many years, not as long as I've lived here. So
But we
there's a
all
lot of
still call it that, which
I
we'll get
know.
into later in the program about Wanamaker's and Macy.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. And I saw, I think on Friday that the street was closed down, so they must be doing some work underneath. So that's exciting to see. And I hope that they pick out signage and make their facade blend in with the rest of the work that's been done
Hmm.
downtown to bring it to a modern, attractive look that looks cohesive but not matchy
Right.
matchy. However, if you drive around the corner onto Egg Harbor Road, there's one of those digital signs that just feels a little out of place. And I wonder if the Main Street Design Committee was involved.
It's a good question, and hopefully they, will take a look globally downtown at which they have been doing for really decades to try and upgrade things like the signage and the paint and the look of the buildings. Sears, I think, is definitely working with the design committee of Main Street, and it would just be great to have every building owner try and get involved because there's some great ideas that Main Street has about how your building can look great and you can keep tenants by making the building really solid and looking good as people drive by and
Yeah.
attractive. Number one, right? You want it all to be attractive.
Absolutely. And it's not like having the digital LED signs are necessarily anything new in the downtown, but if I'm not mistaken, they're usually in windows and not used as the marquee for the building.
Yeah, I think, Joe, maybe we mentioned this before we got on air, but I think you have to have a variance to get that signage. But that's something that, again, like Gina said, maybe the municipality or the town can keep an eye on throughout the downtown to make sure everybody's doing things the right way. I mean, and I don't. Sometimes it's just an oversight. People don't
Yeah.
know, and that's what the municipal government and Main Street are
Yeah,
for.
like I
Or maybe the code has changed and we're not
Yeah.
aware, and that is where the
Right.
direction
yeah.
the town is going
Or
in.
or
It's just not
Right.
our
yeah.
style, but maybe it's the
Or it
style.
may not necessarily apply to the DT1 zone, the downtown zone. I know there were businesses along the Whitehorse Pike that required a variance in order to get a digital sign, but that may not be the case in the downtown zone. That I'm uncertain.
I'm
Oh,
just
yeah,
saying
you
we
mean
don't.
like the signage in front of the firehouse?
Yeah, the firehouse, I
Right.
believe the winery also required a variance for theirs, but that's the highway business zone, and their regulations over there, I'm sure, are different than the downtown zone.
I seem to recall also that it falls under Pinelands Commission too, in the sense my recollection is it is considered a rotating sign, even though it's digital.
Oh,
Believe it or not, rotating signs are not allowed
I remember
in the Pinelands Preservation
I
Area.
remember when the
And I'm almost 99% sure that I someone can fact check me a little bit more on that, but I'm almost 99% sure because we used to have spinning
hmm
signs for Maz's
yeah.
furniture and other things, and that was you couldn't do it anymore.
I
And I
wonder
believe
if
that's it.
that's changed because the advent of all the digital signs that don't need to move. There are no moving pieces.
I
So
don't
I
know. I
don't
mean,
know. We'll
look,
have to
look.
look into this or have somebody write in or call us and
Yeah,
let
because
us
that may
know.
very well be a
Well, I
case
think
where.
what we all.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying. Well, no, go ahead. You
And
go
say
ahead, Joe.
that may very well be a case where technology has legislation and legislation simply hasn't caught up with it yet for that reason.
Yeah.
The
So we'll
problem
wait and
is,
see what happens.
I was going to say the inch mile issue is the issue because what you don't want is suddenly having the former Wells Fargo Bank and OCAP and Frutamex's building suddenly wrapped in digital signage. You just don't want that. This is not Times Square. It's downtown Hamilton, and at some point you have to say, wait a minute. We have not had this sort of thing, so we don't want to see it going forward. I don't think we do. I mean, we haven't had it in my lifetime.
No.
So
Again, unless that's the direction that they're heading in. Like, and then that's up for Main Street to say and the town to say this is something we want.
well,
It's
then put
not
the big
my
blueberry in the middle of this downtown and let it drop. But
well,
then
that would be fun.
Yeah.
Times Square is here.
Yeah. Put that on the side of the.
Put it on top of the Wells Fargo
Yeah.
building.
Put it right on the side of Wells Fargo. Have a nice little the stock ticker and
Right.
the
Why
big
not?
screen. Yeah.
Right. Drop that ball. Why not?
I think
I'm
we
being
like a
facetious.
little bit of a little I think we like a little bit of an old-fashioned approach to things. And speaking of things that are old-fashioned, I see that the St. Anthony of Abbot Society is kind of making a comeback. Joe, I believe you're a member?
I am, yes. And it's interesting how I became a member. 2 years ago, I decided that I wanted to help push the statue of St. Anthony the Abbot in the procession because St. Anthony the Abbot is not only the patron saint of gravediggers, but his feast day is January 17th, which is the birthday of my great grandfather, Antonio Berenato, who was originally born under another name, but renamed Antonio in honor of St. Anthony the Abbot. And it's also the day, quite unintentional, that I moved into my house. So I'm like, if I'm going to walk with any saint, this guy seems to be the one to do it, particularly
Okay.
kind of fell to the wayside. But there's been a push recently to try and bring it back, just like a couple of years ago, the St. John Society, which had gone
Came back.
quasi dormant, started to make a comeback.
Yeah.
This society is working to come back as well.
It's really exciting. There's going to be a mass Friday, January 17th at St. Joseph's Church on 3rd Street. The mass will begin at 6 p.m. JD Calderon, who is a young man from Hamilton, he is really leading the charge on this. And I'm excited to see that there's somebody who's young, who's really involved, who's passionate about Hamilton, our Italian heritage, our Catholic heritage, and is bringing something back to the community. So I want to say thanks, JD, for taking that on.
That's
And
great.
I look forward to hearing all about it from you, Joe, next
Okay.
week.
Joe, just a point of order for people who are listening. Gesso
Oh,
Sicily
yes.
and in Italy.
Yes.
Yeah, I know we all know, but I just want to make sure that everyone
Yeah.
listening, but patron saint, right, of that
Yeah.
city,
Yeah. That,
which so many people came here to Hamilton from that
yeah.
city.
The church in the
It's
village square is La Chiesa di Sant'Antonio Abate. I don't remember the year that it was built, but the cornerstone was laid on January 17th. So that particular saint has been very, very important to the people of Gesso for hundreds of years.
And then, while you have that on the other side of things that are new, we read recently that a property outside of Hamilton was recently acquired, I think for $8.2 million to build a warehouse. Did you guys read that article?
saw it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I read all of it, but I
Yeah.
saw it.
I skimmed it.
So it's an industrial site in Winslow Township. It's 24.79 acres. It's going to host a quote cutting edge industrial facility of 300,000 square feet. And it is going to have ceiling heights of up to 45 feet, durable reinforced concrete structures. And it's going to be in Winslow Township. So that's right next door to us. And it's something, is this going to be like those warehouses that we see when we go 206 towards Trenton? You see those giant warehouses. Is it going to be something like that? Or what's it going to look like? And it's near 73, obviously the expressway. And it's going to be really close to the ports of Philly, Newark, Baltimore, Wilmington. So it could be a big deal in terms of traffic coming in and out of
Well,
there.
traffic in terms of employment, I would imagine. And it's not like that particular area is necessarily a stranger to industry. That's where, if I'm not mistaken, that's less than a quarter mile from the Kellogg's facility. So it's,
Absolutely.
yeah, but a
Yeah,
facility of that
I
size, you're
think
talking
if
about a lot of jobs.
yeah, these things do create jobs, and they do create some economic development, and of course they add to your tax rateable base.
And they don't put
You
kids
know,
in the
Right.
schools. So there's a
no,
positive.
no, they don't. So I don't want to come out anti, but by the same token, if you thought that the fanciful digital Times Square of downtown was a threat to the character of the community in Hamilton, if suddenly one or two of these were dropped, it would be a very different landscape than Hamilton is used to. Anyone who drives up 206 can see what I mean by that. So there's sort of pros and cons to these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what happens. I'm just really, the whole thing has me curious. It's a lot of money that they've talked about with regards to this. It's a huge building. There's just a it's it's gonna be a big project.
Hmm.
And I'm curious to see how the construction goes. I drive that way very often. So, how is that going to go down? And what's it going to be like adding that level of construction on Route 7, near Route 73 in Winslow
Well,
Township, in that
and
area?
traffic after it's
Yeah.
open. I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to have people are going to be going in and out of there. But again, that's what it's zoned for. I get like I can play
Yeah.
devil's advocate. I mean, it's that if you're going to put it somewhere, that's where you're supposed to put it.
So we wish
And
them
it
a lot of
should be
luck,
able to do that.
and we'll see where this goes and if this is the beginning of these kinds of construction facility sites in this area. So we'll see what happens with that in the coming weeks. But also on the other side, we have to talk about our poll last week. And I have to admit that well, I don't want to say I was wrong because I don't believe I was wrong, but an overwhelming number of people in this community say, and our listeners and our viewers on social media, they say lunch meat
Yeah.
and not cold cuts, even though it's
You know
cold cut
why?
meat.
You know why? Because it's lunch meat. That's what it's called.
Mm.
That's why people say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You weren't
So
necessarily
I
wrong. You were
admit,
just outnumbered, outvoted.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the wrong side of
Were
history.
you
Yeah. But
were you stunned? Yeah, that's right. Were you stunned by the number of responses to the lunch meat cold cuts question? More importantly, I mean, it seems pretty amazing to see this many people interested in the debate.
well, I can't get over the number of people who called me or just randomly texted me and did explain to me why I was wrong. And I'm like, it's lunch meat
Well,
versus
they're going
cold
to do
cuts. This
that.
isn't like a life altering commentary. This is just, what do you call it? And they really went into it and they said, we just don't understand it, Gina. How could you possibly say cold cuts? And I was like, this is what I've always called it.
I had a story from my mother. She called me up and she said, "Listen, I call it lunch meat, but in when we used to have Sunday dinners, later in the evening we would have sandwiches and we would call them cold cuts," she said. So I don't know what to tell you. She did say that term cold cuts was used, but only on Sunday. When Sunday dinner was in the early afternoon, it was a bigger dinner, and then later you got a little peckish, so you had to have some
now,
sandwiches, and they were made out of
now,
cold
now
cuts.
the interesting thing is that my family did the same thing. We would have Sunday dinner around 2 o'clock, maybe 3 o'clock, and then around 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock, we would have later dinner, supper, whatever you want to call it, and it was sandwiches,
Yeah.
but we called it lunch meat. Really, growing up, the only place that I can remember that called them cold cuts was Sacco's Deli. That used to be on the corner of 13th and Messina Avenue. That said cold cuts right on the sign. But that, to my recollection, was the only time I'd ever seen the term cold cuts.
There you go.
So I can admit that I was outvoted. I have been humbled, but I appreciate all of your support and for voting in and letting us know what you think, even if you thought I was wrong. And trust me, now I have a record of all of you who thought I was wrong. Thanks, guys. To
Well,
me.
it was almost a fine concession
Yeah,
speech
yeah.
until the
It
end
just
there.
there's nothing sinister going on with you, is there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
No.
yeah.
Which brings us to this week's Jersey Oddcast poll. And this comes out of discussions that Gabe, Joe, and I have had on a regular basis. How do you grocery shop? What is your approach to acquiring food for your house? Joe, how do you acquire your groceries?
In person with cash money. I I I
Ooh, not
well, I
even
mean, sometimes I use a debit card, but any type of legal
okay.
tender, but I go in person, particularly if I'm buying meat or if I'm buying produce of some kind. I don't trust anybody else to look at, if and I'm like, all right, I want ground beef. I know what I'm looking at. I want apples or I want asparagus, I want parsley. I know what I'm looking at. I don't trust anybody else who, as far as I know, will just walk up, grab the first thing, throw it in whatever cart they've got, and that's it. I am a little bit more discerning when it comes to my produce. Or even dry goods, canned goods, anything. If the label's ripped, I put it back. If the can's dented, I put it back. I don't trust anybody else to handle my food like that.
How many days a week do you go shopping? How often do you go?
I usually do like a big shop every 2 weeks, and then I'll walk down to the store maybe 3 days a week and just buy as I need.
Okay, gotcha. Gabe?
I don't have the issue that Joe does about people fondling his produce, which I get that though, because it is weird sometimes to think when the bags come to the house, oh, somebody had their hands on this. I get it. But I think that's superseded for me with it's convenient. I like it delivered. I do like to go to the markets, like Joe said. I think what you mean, Joe, when you say the store, you don't mean the
No,
larger
no, no.
market when you're saying market, right? And that's a very Hamilton way of shopping, where oh well, I'm going to go and see the smaller store and walk in, and you see everybody you know and this sort of thing, whether they work there or whether they shop there. It's a lot of the
Yeah.
regulars. So I do go to the markets for that and for certain items, um,
I mean, Gabe, you
lunch
do
meat,
go to the store every Sunday for cold cuts.
but lunch meat, not for cold cup. I don't go for lunch. I don't know what you're talking. But no, I go every week. Yeah, I go every week,
I
and
mean,
they
you
you
talk
know they see me.
Eagles, you have a whole thing going on
Yeah,
there.
we have a whole. I mean, it's fun and it's social, right, Joe? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
part you like. Sometimes you don't like that. I'll leave that part. That's why I like the idea of it being delivered, because maybe some days you don't want to run into everybody or whatever, and you don't have to anymore because there is such a delivery system now. So I'm a hybrid. I'd say I'm a hybrid. And you?
Because you do that one level of grocery shopping for us on Sundays. I do everything else online. And occasionally, rarely I go with you to the grocery store on a Sunday, but for the most part I do it all online. I love the convenience of it. I have them delivered to our back door. I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm sometimes peopled out and I don't want to talk in the big grocery store with people. I just want a quiet experience. So I have it delivered. But I also love having everything delivered. And I think my way of shopping has really changed over the last 20 years.
It's
I used to love going shopping and now I don't. I don't enjoy the experience anymore.
it's funny when you think about it. Either one of you ever see the movie The Net, Sandra Bullock, 1995?
I think I saw it in
Yeah.
1995.
This method of shopping really was predicted with Net, because I don't remember her character, but I remember she was a computer programmer, and she was essentially like a shut-in, and she did all of her grocery shopping, all of her food delivery, all of everything was online. And it at the time was made to indicate how much of a shut in and how isolated that she was from the rest of society. But now that's just how a lot of people do. And it doesn't have that same stigma about it, which I find interesting.
Well, I think it's a lot more sequestered world. So I think what happened is, the people who are a little more stay at home are no longer seen as
Right.
odd, because there are a lot of people who work from home now. There are a lot of people who do things and they don't go to an office. So it's been normalized, I
Yeah.
think. Well, I mean, would you
Yeah.
guys say?
In the last
Yeah, I
five
think
years,
that's a fair
absolutely.
assessment. But let's ask our viewers, what do you guys think? How let's Our Jersey Outcast poll is, how do you grocery shop? Are you grocery shopping in person? Are you doing it online? Or are you like Gabe, you're doing some sort of hybrid version? We want to know, we kind of want to see where the trends are. And maybe I'll be popular this week, or once again, I will be the loser. It's fine. It's okay. My feelings will be fine with that.
Don't take it personally. Oh wait, you already have.
Oh, I
Yeah,
have. And there's a list now because,
yeah.
my feelings are hurt.
She'll be okay, viewers. She'll be okay.
Speaking of feelings being hurt, the Macy's in Center City,
Mm.
Philadelphia is closing. And while that is not in New Jersey, a lot of us from New Jersey do shop there, have been there, have gone to the light show, seen the Eagle, and it's kind of a little bit heartbreaking to see that end of an era coming. And does that tie into people online shopping again? But do you guys have memories of going to the Macy's in Philadelphia?
Oh yeah, I'm
I
When I went, and I'm sure same with Gabe, when we went, it was Wanamaker's still the first time I saw the light show. And the building was just massive, and the light show was extraordinary. The organ sounded loud and beautiful. We all climbed on the eagle. So like I can remember back when it was still Wanamaker's. It was even featured, if I'm not mistaken, in Mannequin, 1987. That was the shooting location for that
Yeah.
cult classic, for lack of a better term.
You don't
The
like
woman
Kim
who was in
Oh,
Cattrall?
I
that
love,
was Samantha from
yeah,
Sex and
I
the City.
love
Yeah.
Kim Cattrall, and I've loved her since Mannequin, and I thought Estelle Getty was great, and so was Andrew McCarthy. But the whole premise was just weird, as one would expect from an '80s rom com.
Wasn't there a Twilight Zone episode that was somewhat
Yeah,
similar
yeah, where the
with
mannequins would come to
mannequins?
life for once
Right.
a week, and they'd have a life. So yeah, actually, this was the lighter side of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, if there could be such a thing. Gina, for me, it was we would go there. It was an event, even not even if you didn't go at Christmas. Although I've been there long enough to remember that I think John Facenda did the voiceover for the
Yes,
light show, and then Julie Andrews was brought in
Mm.
to replace that later on. And the light show, the organ, the eagle in the grand court. I remember one time being there. I forget if it was something to do with the organ, but Ed Randell was giving out cake for people. I remember that was, and I happened to be there. We didn't even know that was happening, but we ran into it. And then the only other thing is a personal memory of that building, which I don't think will change, even though the store is going out. But a lot of people don't realize there's an office building on top of that building. And one of the offices in that, when I worked for then Congressman Frank Lowe back in 1996, was the Army Corps of
mm,
Engineers. And they were on I think the 10th floor of that building. And we had a big meeting about beach replenishment up in that building. And I just remember going into the, bottom floor and then going up the elevators and thinking to myself at 22, wow, this is kind of a big deal when you're in Center City and you're in the Wanamaker building. And I think at that time it was not Macy's. It might have been
uh,
Hex.
I
I
think
think.
after Wanamaker, I think it was Lord and Taylor for a while.
Lord and Taylor.
Very
Lord and
briefly.
Taylor. Yep, Lord and Taylor. I think it was Lord and Taylor then. Thank you, Joe. So, but that was my memories of that building. It's an iconic building. It's an iconic structure. I hope, just like we talk about, what are we going to do with the former Wells Fargo Bank building in Hamilton because it's so prominent and it's been there forever. On a much much larger level, Philadelphia better have an idea of what they're going to do with the Wanamaker building because you can't just let something like that
If
go.
Well, according to news articles, the building itself is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and according to the Philadelphia Historical Commission, the Wanamaker Grand Court is one of 5 protected historical interiors in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
So
And that's all
hopefully,
great, but there's not going to be a department store there. So,
I know, but hopefully the organ will be protected that was brought over from the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis.
yeah.
Hopefully that'll
with
be
If
an eagle.
protected, the eagle,
Yeah, if
all of
I'm not
that.
mistaken, from what I've read, both the organ and the eagle are protected. So whoever moves in or whoever purchases the building, whoever becomes the next tenant, can't alter them because they are protected. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be open to the public anymore. To Gabe's point, if it's not a store of some kind, they just may be
Yeah.
stowed away for none to see. But at the very least, they'll be protected.
It's just one of those changes that are happening and you're kind of, wondering, are you overly sentimental? Is this progress? And Philadelphia has had its, challenges, and it's not a surprise to see this large retailer pulling out of the city at this point.
Well, and it's 2025, and obviously Wanamaker's is a a sort of a holdover from not last century, but the century
Oh yeah.
before that. So you have to ask yourself, how long can the concept of a department store last? And I'm always the movie Other People's Money, that great line that was by Danny DeVito. His character says the last buggy whip factory was probably the best buggy whip factory, but factory still closed because nobody wanted buggy whips
Yeah,
anymore,
and
and that's it.
and if
So I mean,
if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure John Wanamaker actually pioneered the whole concept of not only a department store, but as a department store as a whole retail experience. And because you know that one of my favorite hobbies is reading old newspapers, he was advertising in the South Jersey Republican in Hamilton in the 1870s. So, and then actually, there was an artist who lived in Hamilton, George Washington Nicholson, who had been commissioned by John Wanamaker himself for a mural that hung in the Wanamaker building until the 1950s. So even though it is not, even though it's in Pennsylvania, there's still a connection to us there.
sure.
Is that
And the
painting
last,
still there?
No, it was
no, and
sold to a private collector sometime in the 1950s. Unfortunately, it is no longer there.
Okay.
but I will say, to connect this, tie it all up with a bow. There's a lot of Hamilton connections. Hamilton people absolutely went there. I think you it depended on what you like. Were you a Gimbel's person, a Strawbridge's person, a Wanamaker person? Wanamaker tended to be the toniest of all of
Hmm.
them, and it lasted the longest. But I will say, I think it's ironic, Joe, that you just said reading old newspapers to tie this all up in a bow. The Philadelphia Inquirer offices are now in Strawbridge's. They moved there, and then the other thing to say is that if you look at it this way, we talked about delivering groceries. And if you think about what did in department stores like Wanamaker's, it was
Oh yeah,
Amazon and things like that. It this
Y-
it changed. There was a paradigm shift in the way people bought
yeah,
goods, and they didn't have to go to the store anymore.
yeah.
And that's, I think, what changed
The
ultimately.
experience itself no longer became as important as simply getting the product.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, and that experience is gone. I mean, I think they used to have a restaurant in there, like it's something you can get like afternoon tea, something like, or
Yes.
lunch.
The Crystal Tea Room.
Yeah, and I remember doing that in New York at different what do you call it, department stores and having that experience. And that was, you felt like you were on a really nice afternoon to out with like usually my mom or one of my cousins, and that was very special. And to those
Oh,
days are gone.
Harrods in
Yeah,
London.
Yeah, we did that.
Good
Uh,
example. I mean,
yeah.
where it was like you said, Joe. It no longer became important to have the
yeah.
experience to go, whereas it used to be that oh, we're going to go shopping, we're going to go up to Philly, and we're going to make a day of it. That's just not the way I think a lot of people shop
No,
anymore.
no.
Really.
And
Joe, if people want to go up to Macy's in Philadelphia this week, will the weather be okay? Is it time for the Oddcast
well,
forecast?
it is always time for the Oddcat forecast, according to the app on my smartphone. The weather is going to be chilly, but we are in January. Wednesday, it's going to be partly cloudy all week. Wednesday, we're looking at a high of 34 and a low of 19. Thursday is going to be a little bit cooler with a high of only 32 and a low of 22. And Friday, it's going to be a little less chilly with a high of 41 and a low of 28. So if they decide to go into the city this week, bundle up, wear a hat, wear some gloves.
I love that.
Thanks,
It's
Joe.
going to be a great week in Hamilton. There's a lot of things happening, starting to come alive. Environmental Commission is meeting
We
Wednesday.
met,
Is that
no, we met this
correct?
past Wednesday,
Oh,
actually. We had our,
oh, you're right. It is.
yeah,
It was the second Wednesday.
yeah,
Sorry,
no,
my
quite all
bad.
right.
No
How was
cold
that?
cuts for you.
It was a little bit on the quicker side. It was mostly a reorg meeting. There was really no actionable items on the agenda and just a basic detailing of some goals for 2025 that we had covered at the December meeting. So we were out in about 25 minutes.
Who's the chair?
Dan Bachalis again, and we believe that was a
Oh,
record for
very
him.
nice. The meeting, the number of years he's been chair, or the meeting
The meeting
length?
length, absolutely. Yeah, he was
Okay.
very proud of it, actually.
I am sure Dan was. He's a great guy and very dedicated to that committee, and he does a very thorough job.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes, he does.
If anybody wants to get in touch with us, how can they do that, Joe?
They have a number of options. We are on Facebook and Instagram under Jersey Oddcast. They can email us at jerseyoddcast@gmail.com or call us at 609 444 6178.
Thank you. And I think that's it for this week's episode of the Jersey Oddcast. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you next week,
So
guys.
long.